Hey guys, I'm Pete Riley. I'm responsible for sales and marketing here at AnswerRocket. I'm one of the co-founders of the company, and I'm joined by Jim Scott, head of developer relationships and data science at NVIDIA. So thanks for joining us today. And we're going to talk about how to drive proactive and AI analytics with machine learning bots and GPUs in our presentation today. And obviously, it's a combination of AnswerRocket and NVIDIA. So again, appreciate those guys joining us. So look, a lot of you guys in the audience probably know this. I mean, this stat has been really cited over the years in terms of the adoption rate for traditional BI and analytics being really stuck at sort of this 30 to 35% level. And in a Gartner study that we sort of quote here at the bottom, ease of use is really the single biggest hurdle today. Also, what another Gartner study is showing that 87% of organizations are still classified as having this low BI intelligence, business intelligence and analytics maturity. And what we're seeing at the end of the day, we've sort of been stuck, like I said, here for probably the better part of a decade at this point. And what you're seeing is that really the traditional BI and analytics stack and visualization tools are really just not enough to move the needle there. And so, what users really want, they don't want sort of the more traditional dashboards. They're useful, but like I said, they're not enough. They just want the deeper insights fast. They want them easy. They sort of want to be Tony Stark and have all the have Jarvis really available to them. When you talk to them though, they really feel like what they're getting is something a lot more like this. I got a hard drive, or I got a fan I got to install. I have to do all these sort of more challenging things. In their world, it's I got to take training on this tool, or I got to understand the data model, and so on. And it's just a real challenge. And these are some of the things that we think are really standing in the way of that broader adoption. But the good news is that data and analytics leaders, like everybody on this call, they're focused on machine learning and they're focused on AI as critical technology to move the ball forward. And that's good news because there's a lot more challenges coming. Data's growing, as you guys know. It's harder and harder to get analysts and data scientists. What we see a lot is business folks, if they really are sort of in a crunch to get speed to insights, they're sort of going off on their own and doing their own things. So you're sort of seeing these rogue sort of decisions being made. And ultimately, obviously, the rise of AI and machine learning is certainly on the way, if not here already. And, this was something that was published by McKinsey just last spring. A lot of changes last, but at the time they were saying that the combination of AI and analytics, they thought over the coming 10 years would produce 13 trillion in additional output. And so all this really comes around to, look, we need a new way. And, we started the company, AnswerRocket, started 6.5 years ago, and really saw sort of the possibilities around, all right, what could we do differently? And the first thing that we saw at the time, when our CEO started the company, he said, Pete, I can ask my phone to make a dinner reservation, but I can't get a simple question about my business sort of answered without having somebody go pull a spreadsheet and send it to me 2 weeks later. So as consumers, we're just so used to seeing these kinds of, having these types of technologies in our life where we can just sort of ask for information or get really easy access to data that we need or have tasks done on our behalf. And so we think the first sort of hurdle is to make this enterprise experience much more like the consumer experience. And secondly, we think really just over the last 5 years, what we've seen is this huge leap in the capabilities of AI and machine learning, combined with the data available, combined with cloud computing and so on. So it's really the next level is about augmenting humans with machine learning and AI to get them closer to that Tony Stark experience. So what we do is, and what we see really as the possibilities of augmented analytics, is taking really what you see as the current process, which as people go through an analysis process, what you learn is very often they'll start at a dashboard, but then they'll pull data from various places, they'll merge it in a spreadsheet, they'll sort of sort it and filter it to really try to figure out, well, what happened? Like, what if I'm a consumer brand? Like, why did my brand, do well or not well, and so on? and they spend 80% of their time on that. And what you hear from them is they really only get to spend 20% of the time at best on the things that they actually are good at and enjoy doing, which is this ideation and execution component. And what we're seeing is AI is really by automating a lot of the things that, frankly, humans are not great at, that machines are much, much better at. It really allows you to flip the script. It allows you to take that analysis and make that the 20%, and allows humans to do the things they really like to do and are good at around this idea and execution, and spend 80% of their time on that. So what we're seeing is the ability to automate routine, high-frequency analysis and bring that down to near zero latency instead of weeks, potentially, to get analysis done. And ultimately, we think it allows humans to be more human in their work. So Gartner is talking about this idea that these worlds are colliding, and specifically what they mean is on the left-hand side, you sort of see the traditional analytics and BI world. And on the right-hand side, we have the data science and machine learning world, and these are really colliding around this idea of augmented analytics. You can see in the quote there, it's really not just about a single insight, but it's really around going from data to insight to model to action in a single workflow. And this is really now a possibility. And as I mentioned, when you ask somebody, when we're working with some of our larger customers, they would say, we started with just natural language search. We started with this idea that I just want to know what sales were by month or market share and so on. And what we found out is they said, well, this is really valuable, but what I really want to know is, well, how did my brand do? Or what's going on in this category? We're working with Nielsen, for example, they have 3,000 consultants that do 100,000 analysis projects a year. Turns out there's actually only 9 types of projects. And so, I want to analyze, for example, what's going on in a category, what's going on in rice or something. What ends up happening is this workflow that you sort of see in front of you. So you might want to know how your category did, but you might hit a dashboard, you might hit a spreadsheet, you might access various resources, merge and cleanse the data, conduct your analysis, build your visualizations, figure out what you think the results are telling you, which, by the way, you might be good at, you might not be that great at, depending on your experience. And then you realize, okay, I got to present this to my boss in 24 hours. And so you typically take some Excel charts and some text and put it in PowerPoint to explain what the drivers were in that category, for example. And as we talk to them in their particular example, this process takes 30 to 40 hours, and which just creates this huge sort of latency between the time you get the data and the time you actually know what happened and take action. And it's very inconsistent in terms of the results of that. So, obviously depending on the skills that you have. So really what is now possible, and what we see as a big component of augmented analytics, is this idea of automating all that middle part, right? I want to ask the question, I want to get sort of the analysis. And the way we have something we call Rocketbots, which basically gathers the relevant data for analysis based on the question you asked and sort of how you asked it. It analyzes that and tests all the assumptions and uses whatever AI or machine learning sort of makes sense based on the problem you're trying to solve, and then builds a story in the form of more familiar sort of decks of slides of the like you would normally, a human might normally create to facilitate a decision. The idea is to be able to ask natural language questions, but not just get a piece of data, but to get an actual machine learning answer. And here are just some examples where I might find customers and leverage a deep learning network, not really knowing that I'm even doing that. I'm just sort of asking my natural business question, all the way to getting a forecast or asking for product segments, which may leverage a K-means algorithm. Again, without the business person knowing that, they're just sort of asking their business question. So Answer Rocket sort of bridges that, is sort of at that collision point. And the way it works is you connect to whatever data makes sense to solve the business problem. You're provided with this conversational interface where you can ask sort of the basic what questions, what was my sales growth last year, to how was my brand doing, and really get this approachable analysis with a combination of visualizations and natural language generated automatically. So what are some of the important elements to an augmented analytics solution? Well, we think there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. One, you've got to be able to leverage your existing data platforms. You don't want to have to sort of invest in yet another data platform. We want to be able to leverage the investments you've already made, and you want to be able to get the full functionality of an augmented analytics solution, regardless of the platform that you're using. And it's got to remember ease of use was sort of that big barrier. And so you've got to have a natural language query interface. We think that's still critically important. You've got to have natural language insights, and you've got to have mobile and voice. It also needs to allow you to leverage the best AI machine learning available. The best AI machine learning available, frankly, is open source, right? So you don't want to initially buy a solution with that sort of a black box. You want to be able to actually plug in your own work from your own data scientists and your own algorithms using these tools into an augmented analytics solution. And you want to be able to not just answer these basic fact-oriented questions, but you want to automate the entire analytics workflow. And specifically, the way Rocketbots they take these skills, these pre-built analytical functions and machine learning algorithms, combines them into something we call a Rocketbot. Because what you'll find is these sort of vary depending how you put these together. Sort of vary depending on the problem you're trying to solve in the domain that you're in, and then producing output that makes sense for that domain and for that problem. We've got some of the sample ones here at the bottom that we've built around brand health, market share. We do a lot in the consumer goods space, but generic ones more like trend insight. And the key is being able to build your own. You want to be able to extend this platform. And then finally, has anybody ever just sort of asked Google questions all day? Yeah, me neither. And we don't sit there and ask questions. We typically see content, then we react to it, and then we have questions. And so really the final thing that's important is that the system generate content, analytical content about your business, put those into a knowledge graph and make those available to users in a news feed and trending stories, just like you would normally sort of consume news. And it enables you to move from sort of this reactive pull model to this push model where you're not starting with the whole analysis process. You're starting with consuming analysis and then figuring out and then taking a look at that and then figuring out what the actions are that you need to take. So all this to say, so we've been building this for years now, and one of the things that we've experienced is that we'll take a process that takes 40 hours, we'll reduce it to 3 minutes, and the users will still go, well, gee, that's sort of kind of slow, right? Because they have this expectation, of a very fast sort of search experience. And so because of that, we actually turned to, because we wanted to create richer and deeper insights and really leverage all we could with machine learning, we started to see some limitations of sort of CPU architectures. And so we started looking towards GPU architectures. And we started thinking about looking at different things that were out there available to do that. So we actually turned to the Rapids AI initiative sponsored by NVIDIA to do that, to integrate AnswerRocket to GPUs and allow you to get more from that from AI in machine learning. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jim to talk a little bit about Rapids AI and NVIDIA.
Thanks, Pete. And so the exciting thing about this is that we all have experienced the why did the question I asked take so long to give me an answer? And this approach is really the real benefit that people strive for, right? It's the smiley faces at the top that we really want to deliver on. And so being able to provide data science solutions to the data analysts, data engineers, data scientists is really the key value proposition of Rapids. And so with Rapids, it provides the support through these different distributed data processing engines to support data analytics, machine learning, and deep learning use cases. And so here, the solution that AnswerRocket has built really brings along the GPU without the user ever knowing. It brings along machine learning concepts without the end users ever knowing that those algorithms have been implemented. And they get the benefit of the speed and performance. They get the answers they want in a timely fashion, and it keeps them happy. When you look at the actual performance numbers of the hardware, there's major cost savings that occur in the background, especially if you just look at something as simple as cloud, because it's really easy to do apples to apples comparison. You can do the same amount of work on a handful of GPUs that it takes hundreds of CPU servers. And each one of those servers has like 8 CPUs available on it. So it's hundreds upon hundreds of CPUs compared to a handful of GPUs. Now, generally speaking, when you consider why do it, well, if it makes things faster and gets you answers quicker, you're going to be happier. The idea is to reduce the total amount of iterations in the same amount of time that you were spending, because you may ask the wrong question once you get the result. And so you see the result, you say, I want to ask another question, and so ask another question, you want another answer really fast. And so when we look at the reason why the GPUs deliver so much more value, it's really about the embarrassingly ridiculous level of parallel capabilities that the GPUs bring with it. If you can jump to the next slide, Pete. And what happens here is that the GPUs provide thousands upon thousands of cores that can process this work. And because we're talking about predominantly structured data, the embarrassingly level of parallelness that exists within these types of workloads, it becomes very easy to perform more iterations in less time, deliver a greater value. And all the time everyone's using it, they don't even know it's there. So they pick up the benefits without having to worry about the implementation details, which ultimately is really the big driver here. Back to you, Pete.
Thanks. So really to try to wrap things up for you guys in terms of how so what is the value that you can unlock with AI automated analytics, and what are some of the things you sort of look for, right? So look for not just NLQ but NL, but automation of workflows. That's really what's going to sort of unlock a lot of the value. That's been our finding, as opposed to just being able to provide sort of the what questions, and being able to really deeply answer the why or how sort of questions. Another thing that I can't recommend strongly enough, and I know this probably sounds like falling apple pie, for years we've been talking about really need to start within the analytics space, got to start with the business outcome. It is increasingly important here in the AI or machine learning world. If you just take a tool like this and go plop it on top of some data without a thought to who the business users are and the problems they're trying to solve, you're gonna still struggle with that adoption. So start with the business outcome is critically important. And look for solutions that start with content versus just NLQ, right? So start with where again you can sort of be fed stories and so on. Be able to make sure you can leverage your own AI or machine learning as part of the solution, and look to leverage your data assets and infrastructure versus sort of gets to sort of with a solution where it requires you to sort of throw that out the window and sort of move to an entirely new infrastructure. So with that, that's the presentation we have today. I think we have maybe another minute for questions if we want to do that. But here's our contact information. Would love to hear from all of you, and any questions that you have if we don't get to them on the call. I'd appreciate your time today.